Thanks so much. Fantastic. I'm going to get started. We're 1 minute in and want to optimize our time. Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy Tran, the former internal vice president for UNAVSA from 2014 to 2016 and member of the board of directors of UNAVSA. Welcome to the 2024 UNAVSA Executive Board Elections Town Hall Q&A. This is a super exciting time as we begin the next chapter of our organization. Today's town hall will be run by myself and one of our newest board of director members, 𝐿 Nguyen from the Midwest region. 𝐿, say hello. Give everyone a nice. Awesome. We also have Kelly Tran, our current UNAVSA president, on the line that will help a lot with the back end, logistics, the chat, any questions that you all might have, either from our candidates or anyone from the audience. And we'll be managing all of the conversations on the side. So wave, Kelly, say hello.
Hello.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Kelly. In the next approximately 60 minutes, you'll be participating in an ever so important process of deciding the next executive board. This is a relatively new process that we are getting through just to, acclimate from coming back from virtual conferences in the past and trying to optimize our time while you all are at conference this upcoming year. So just know that this format is a little bit different. And I'll hand it over to 𝐿 to talk about, what else to expect today.
Yeah, so yes, as Lucy just said, my name is 𝐿. I'm from the Midwest. Today, you will be following a format design in partnership with the election committee and the board of directors. You'll be meeting with a total of 6 candidates, but as Lucy just mentioned earlier, Anthony got a family emergency, so he could not make it. So there'll be 5 candidates today. You should be ready, already watch each candidate's speech. So today's focus will be solely on Q&A. During this time, we will maintain in communication the remaining time with our candidate and with the voter in the room, ensuring we stay on schedule. Both Lucy and I are co-moderator for today's event, and we will bring clarity, color, and depth to the conversation. This Q&A will be recorded and shared shortly after today's session.
Awesome. Thanks, 𝐿. At any time, you all can submit questions to one or both candidates, depending on the position, to answer during the designated Q&A time. 𝐿 and I will be coordinating the questions, ensuring variety and quality of the questions. We do have pre-selected questions, however, and so we'll be taking them from our own set of questions, as well as potentially from the audience. You all have the opportunity to submit it via the Zoom chat to the right of the panel of this digital event, but we will also be able to prioritize them based on relevance and value towards the conversation. So please note that there may be a chance that your question may or may not get asked. If you do chat a question, please indicate what position it's specifically for. Otherwise, we will treat it as a general question meant for any position. Both candidates will have an opportunity to answer each question in their allotted time frame. Every candidate will have a full 10 minutes for their Q&A portion. And if there are 2 candidates for any one position, the same set of questions will be asked to the opposing candidate, and they have been selected at random. And then I'll hand it over to 𝐿 to finish some more additional guidance before we jump into Q&A.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yep, there you go. Yep, go ahead.
Our goal is to give conversation direction and to ensure questions get answered. The questions are known to us and our team only. None of the candidates have seen the question. We hope to get as many questions as possible. Because we are optimists, we are sure the candidate will apply by keeping the answer concise and on point. Each candidate has as much as 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to the common question. There will be no voting done today session. The election process will continue at UNAVSA conference, where the next and final session will be at conference introduction, which is 90-minute session that will include reintroduction of the candidate and regional caucus. The 90-minute session will begin in the ballroom setting, where candidate will have 20 to 30 minutes to present on stage. Regional will break up to discuss the CP and the election. This session will be led by election committee and supported by the executive board. Final executive result will be announced on July 14. Now, as we begin, we will start with Q&A in the following order: Secretary, Treasurer, EVP, IVP, then lastly, the President candidate.
Awesome. Thanks, Antho. So as a reminder, 90 seconds to respond to a common question. There is a little bit of leeway for you all to finish your thoughts today, but if you don't conclude soon after, you'll reach a hard stop where we will notify you. We as the moderators want to make sure we provide depth and clarity for the conversation, and we may ask some follow-up questions. So just know that you may expect that. We should also leave some surplus time for dialogue if that's necessary. But we're going to be covering a wide breadth of topics amongst all of the candidates today. While we can't tell you exactly what the questions are, we want to make sure that we cover a wide breadth of topics such as civic engagement, sexual harassment, the UNAVSA Constitution, scaling the organization, sustainability, language, culture, identity, and community. Could be a variety of the topics. So any questions from our candidates before we get started today? Or any questions from the audience for folks that are here? Cool. I'm so excited. Let's get started. So now we will begin our 10-minute Q&A for Natalie Phan for the role of secretary. Welcome, Natalie.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I am currently in Vancouver, Canada for a dragon boat race. So my team is haggling me from the side. Hello, everyone. I'm really glad and honored to be here to run for your secretary position for UNAVSA.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie. We are excited to get started. So as our first candidate and first question for the secretary position, we are going to ask you, what's your communication plan with UNAVSA and its constituents? Again, you have 90 seconds from the start time when you speak.
Thank you so much. My plan for communication between UNAVSA and the regions is very clear and open communication. One of my goals of mine is to have a newsletter that we used to have in the past to clearly explain what UNAVSA is doing, but also express what the regions are doing and all the events that they're doing to showcase what is going on in the regions. Another thing that I want to do in the future is, because workplace is closing and it's UNAVSA's main form of communication, I do want to find another source of communication online that we will be able to use that will last a lot longer than workplace, just because it is not being sourced by Facebook anymore. Another way I would like to communicate as well is obviously talking with our cores to work on that newsletter, but also just expressing and understanding what they want to share with the community through Instagram and through other reels, such as our Discord and other information, just because I feel that I always feel that UNAVSA is serving the regions most of the time, always. And I think that in order for other regions to know what other regions are doing, UNAVSA is the main source of communication. And I plan on doing that through newsletters, Instagram, Facebook, as well as updating our Discord for use, as finding more means of communication through our hopefully different workplace application in the future. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie, for the question. Our next question on docket here is, what do you think are key success measures of communication for UNAVSA? What outcomes would you expect?
I think a key measure of success for UNAVSA is when any general member in a region knows about UNAVSA. I think that is something that indicates that we as an organization are serving our best purpose, which is connecting other regions with other regions, as well as people from regions and from local schools knowing about what UNAVSA is, whether that be giving cores a slide docket about what UNAVSA is and helping them know what it is, what our community stands for, but also having them understand all the events we do. Something that I want to highlight are our cabinets. I feel that it is really important that even general members outside of UNAVSA, but general members of our regions, know about our community engagement, such as BSA Academy and their work with the Department of Education with Orange County, or even CPP and all that stuff. If a general member like a freshman from college in, say, NorCal, where I'm from, they know what UNAVSA is. And I think that shows the open source of communication that we have, whether that be through Instagram, through our newsletters, or even just generally talking through our cores and helping communicate that way as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Natalie, for answering that. Next question that we do have. UNAVSA in the past 2 decades has done a great deal of documentation and policy creation. How do you ensure that this will stay up to date and prevalent to today's needs?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think something that is really important is going through all the source of documentation that we have with our current course and current e-board, as well as our cabinet, such as our constitution, and going through that every year to make sure that our new cores, because I do understand that cores are sometimes 1-year terms, to make sure that they understand and that it is relevant to today's society. I know we have added community safety to our document, and I think that's really important, and keeping update with all of the things that have changed in society, I think is really important as well. And just going through our Google Drive and seeing what's in our resources, is what's in our administration, and tailoring that to the needs of our constituents, because that's really important, whether that be adding more helpful guides and tips of how to use Google Drive, or even having more guides and tips of how to do community safety, of how to run CBP. Just because a lot of times leaderships do change over the course of 1 year and things do get lost, whether that be having more inclusive onboarding to include a lot of other needs, and including people from other regions like their e-boards, their presidents, or even having a proper offboarding to get the information from our outgoing cabinets and staff and gather that information as well, and leave that in a resource document to gather and change our official documentation in the future. I think that's something that's really important to make sure our community and our organization runs as smoothly as it can, gathering all the changes that we need from the past to their future.
Thank you, Natalie. Right on time there. You mentioned constituents and communicating with them. Every constituent is different in terms of their own documentation and resources. So how do you anticipate to align those together with UNAVSA, with your plan that you mentioned?
Yeah, something that I introduced into my region this year actually was when we do a staff onboarding, not only do we invite our cores, our ICCs, and our immediate cabinet, we also invite the presidents, the secretaries, etc., anyone on our constituents or our local schools e-boards, and we invite them there as well and showcase and document exactly how NorCal runs its stuff. So whether that be how to use G Suite, how we use our G Suite, all the other activities that we do, and help them out that way. And then we connect our presidents with the presidents. We try to connect treasurers with treasurers, secretaries with secretaries. And I hope to do that as well, to connect with the regional secretaries, just to see how they manage their own organizational drive and how we can gather for the information from them, and also dispel our information to other secretaries who run the Google Drive, just because I do know each region runs differently and uniquely in their own way that works best for them. And I don't want to change entirely how they run things, because obviously regions prefer other regions' ways of doing things. And that is how I plan on connecting and understanding how each person does their own communication, their own Google Drive, and all that. Sorry, that might be my announcement for races.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for answering my follow-up question. Additional question here for you. We have about 4 minutes left in your slot time. UNAVSA has a bare minimum requirement in taking meeting minutes. How would you go about making these transparent?
Like I mentioned earlier, I think something that we could take from other regions is how they construct their meeting minutes, just because I have seen such as South and Midwest, NorCal is taking inspiration for their meeting minutes of how they run it. So they do obviously attendance guide, what time they come in, and also check-in question, but also clear and concise of their action items and their information, and type it all entirely, even if they don't talk about it. I think that's something that we should do as UNAVSA eBoard as well, but also letting people know that these mini minutes are transparent and they're technically available for everyone to see. And we could post that in the beginning of the year, but also link it in our link tree to let them know that they can technically see our meeting minutes. I think that's something that's really important to remind people that they have access to our constitution. They have access to what we're talking about, and making sure that all the meeting minutes are clear and concise, but also have the appropriate documentation, have the appropriate information needed about all the things that we were talking about, as well as breaking it down by person and including all our cabinet updates there as well. I think that's something that as eBoard, they are liaisons to each cabinet, also putting their information, BOD's topics as well in there. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. All right, I think one of our second to last questions here, how would you keep your colleagues and yourself accountable for bare minimum requirements like keeping our 501c3 in compliance?
Something that I firmly believe in is calling in rather than calling out. We don't know what other people are going through, and that's something that's I always like to keep in mind. So if I notice that someone is not slacking but not doing as much work as they usually do, or not meeting the requirements of UNAVSA, I will try to have a one-on-one meeting with them just to see what is going on with them. Because it's a lot of things like personal matters, family matters, high stress, because I know UVSA is not everyone's first and only job. I know a lot of us have other jobs. So checking on them and seeing what's wrong and how to help them in any way. If they are not slacking, but not doing as much work, why are they not doing much work? If they don't want to tell me, that's fine. To say it's a personal matter and we can work it out together to see how I can help or we can manage the load better, just so that they feel that they are still contributing, but also we are getting the correct work done, especially because UNAVSA is this large organization that serves so many people. As eBoard, we cannot slack as much as we think or should. And I think that just always checking in on people and having one-on-one meetings. Yeah. Sorry.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. Great job. That actually concludes our full 10-minute duration for Natalie. We appreciate you hopping on. I know Natalie is at an event right now, a sports event, so we want to make sure you can get to where you need to go. Appreciate your time, Natalie. If folks have other questions for Natalie, please feel free to send them our way. We'll do our best to see if we can get them answered, but congratulations, Natalie, on completing your Q&A session, and we will move on to our next candidate. So, with that, I would like to welcome Ann Vo to the screen for her Q&A session. Welcome, Ann. Thank you for joining us. She is the second candidate for the secretary position. So we will get started with, again, the first question for our secretary. What is your communication plan with UNAVSA and its constituents?
Yeah, definitely. I think that we are definitely a growing kind of world, right? It's a little bit contradicting to just stay on one type of platform. I think that emails are great, but how many of y'all have got like a spam email and you just go and you don't check it, right? Emails are great, but I think being able to connect on multiple different levels, to be able to connect with people on different levels, like Discord is fantastic for being able to connect with people just overseas, right? Like being able to talk to people that way and having that communication style, and most news I feel like are very important to be spread through word of mouth, which is like kind of like, oh, my friend's going to this event, and utilizing that connections with people. Also, I'm not a huge fan of Workplace. I think that it's very difficult to use for those who don't understand the format. Switching over to something like Slack, which is very communication based and not just like project based, and finding a different platform for projects specifically, because the way that like not Google Hangouts, but like Workplaces use, there's a lot of different formations to it, which can be a benefit, but sometimes simply being able to get like, oh, if I'm trying to connect with Kelly for a question, having a quick Slack message is always super key. And being able to kind of find different avenues for different things to connect with to connect on different topics is really important. And keeping that transparent as well. I'm a huge fan of being transparent, the things that things that I know, that way we're able to work on the same pace and we're on the same page. I feel like it's difficult working on a team when people aren't on the same page, like if there's things that are kept under the table or kept away from different aspects. Like for example, if like when I was on the community safety team and there's things that I needed to handle, but there's certain things that couldn't be like talked about, and now we're both working on different teams, it feels like. So maintaining a sense of transparency so that everyone's on the same page moving forward on any topic. It can be small, just being like, hey, where's this workshop being held? All the way to being a little bit more serious on let's say like a harm report. And now we're all on the same page to be able to be transparent and talk about things, and having different avenues to talk about that, whether it be Slack and having a professional communication style, or we can do email, or if we're just trying to hop on a call, we can do a quick Discord call as well. Utilizing different avenues for communication would be really key to just really uniting different generations as well. Like an 18-year-old might love to use Twitter, right? And being able to utilize all of that together.
Thank you, Anne, for the response. Great. Wanted to hop into our next question for Secretary. What do you think are key success measures of communication for UNAVSA? What outcomes would you expect?
Yeah, I think that it comes to a balance. I think there's a heavy interest in things like conference where we have a surplus of applications and now we have to like turn away great people, or we need to keep to a certain number just because we have so many like influx of people who have an interest in conference. And then you look at the cabinet side and we're begging people to like stay on for another month, or begging people to stay on for another year. And I think a successful outcome of how our organization is getting our news out there is to have a little bit more of a balance in there, like an interest in everything, and an interest in being able to drive people to different aspects of UNAVSA, right? Because like, again, we are not just conference. We're not just like CPP. We're not just this one thing. Being able to diverge into different aspects. We're like, oh my gosh, I need to turn down so many people for my community safety committee, or like, dang, CPP has over 30 people applying. And being able to have that that balance and interest is something that's going to be really really telling of where UNAVSA is progressing to being able to get our information out there and our news out there, and what we do out there.
Thank you for your response, Anne. The next consequent question is, UNAVSA in the past 2 decades has done a great deal of documentation and policy creation. How do you ensure this will stay up to date and prevalent to today's needs?
Yeah, of course. I think before I start talking about this question, I do want to offer a trigger warning. I will be talking about some acts of harm as well as some things that have been going on just in the community as of recently. I think that as a society, we are constantly progressing, and especially with the cases that are happening in Palestine and Gaza, things that are being shared on like Instagram to get media out there is a very new wave of something that we're doing, right? Like, or like we as a society is doing, and being able to utilize that and kind of keeping up with what's happening with different policies and things like that is going to be really key. And how we change with that needs to happen fast. These things happen rapidly. I think I'm going to tap into the just community safety policy in general, just because our community safety policy, I remember working on it about like 3 years ago, and that's already out of date. Not like out of date, but it's definitely things that need to be updated already, right? These things happen very quickly, and I think the first step is to understand and kind of be knowledgeable about whatever topic it is and whatever policy that we're talking about. And from then on, we need to work very quickly, but as well as very accurately. It's the saying of hurry, but don't rush, right? Like we're trying to keep up and we're trying to stay knowledgeable and we're trying to change policies as needed, but we're not trying to rush so that the process is messy, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Anne. To expand on that a little bit more, you talk about pace and speed of news and information. Curious how you think that will happen, and how will you do that and enable that with constituents where typically news may not travel as fast? What avenues would you find most beneficial?
Yeah, of course. I think utilizing really our cores, right? Like that's the team that we kind of rely on to get this information out to our constituents, and really same with kind of these information graphics, as well as different zines and hosting spaces where people can learn. Having all of these avenues are very important because they're all different medias where people are consuming. Whether people see an Instagram and they're kind of scrolling and they're able to read about these things, and keeping that up as well, making sure that we have this information on hand, whether it be a Google Drive where we have these resources available, so that whenever people are ready and mentally have the mental capacity, because I understand that it is very heavy, people who have the mental capacity to kind of deal with this are like, hey, let me go check this out. And we would have those links constantly available, as well as hosting these spaces on a semi-regular basis so that people can come in and also utilize the space to either learn, share, or just kind of hover in that space in themselves as well. And I think that's something that I anticipate myself doing as well, kind of curating these resources, whether it be based on certain topics or based on region. Like different regions have different resources for sexual assault, sexual harassment, different policies that may be available, and keeping that constantly updated so that people who, if there's certain things arise, people are able to utilize them when needed.
Thank you for that response. Last couple of questions as we're about to come up on time here. UNAVSA has a bare minimum requirement in taking meeting minutes. How would you go about making these transparent?
Yeah, I think luckily I still am, I don't know if this is luckily, I'm a graduate student right now, so I'm still a student. So my method of taking notes is take everything down and then edit later, we'll figure it out. And that's kind of where that skill of mine is going to be tapped into as well when we're taking these meeting notes. Being able to just kind of cover everything and then extracting what's important later. That way we're not missing anything. Personally, I don't really like shorthanded notes, because shorthanded is like, okay, I remember it later, but let's say you're not remembering it accurately later when you're recalling it, right? Taking extensive notes, taking a little bit more elaborate notes, and then coming back into the later and extrapolating what's actually important to maintain that transparency and maintaining an accurate understanding of what's being said. Because sometimes things are taken out of context or simply just misunderstood if there's nothing kind of around the conversation that's happening, if I'm taking this one line out of the notes, out of the meeting notes. And so having that ready when we're taking our full meeting notes and maintaining everything that's being talked about on record, and having that available for folks if they have any questions. And of course, people come to eBoard for any questions that may be available for them for UNAVSA, and having those meeting notes available for them, being like, hey, actually, I remember talking about this on June 30th, that meeting that we had, and this is the line that was said, and we can kind of go from there as well.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we've got the last question here, and do want to preface, we did get a lot of questions for the secretary from the general audience, so thank you for that. But given do not want to bias the process, I want to make sure that they are asked the same questions. And for any additional questions, we'll make sure to post and have responses hopefully shared thereafter. So just know that we are getting questions in the back end, and we appreciate you all, general audience, for doing so. The last question we will ask to you, Anne, is how would you keep your colleagues and yourself accountable for minimum requirements, like keeping our 501c3 compliance?
Yeah, of course. And thank you for that question. I when Natalie was asked this question, I thought she phrased it beautifully, a very individualistic mindset of being able to tap into the people that you're working with and being like, hey, where are you at? And being able to work with them for that too. And I think I'd like to talk about this question a little bit more as an organizational aspect of being able to, again, like maintaining the 501c3. I think that starts with being able to understand what that means and understand the knowledge behind that. Like, what does it actually mean to maintain that 501c3 status? What does the president's role entail? And I would have that understanding, and then to be able to, because another thing is, like, I don't want to call in on someone and be like, hey, you're doing this wrong. And then they would go, actually, that's not my job description. And I go, ah. So it definitely starts off with having a good understanding of what that really all means as an entire organization, what falls under what roles, what rules do we need to follow, what laws and policy that are outside of the VSA space that we need to follow as a nonprofit, and maintaining that as well. Like what does that look like if we are working with another nonprofit? What rules does that entail? What XYZ do we need to follow, and having a clear understanding of what that means. That way, if a problem does arise, or if an issue decides to surface, we are able to tap into that a little bit more.
Perfect timing, and thank you so much for answering all of our questions. We will move on now. So just to preface for everyone in the audience, but unfortunately our treasurer did have a family emergency, will not be in attendance today. So we will be doing a separate session, hopefully to get questions answered for the treasurer position. So if you do still have questions for our treasury candidate, please do still submit them, and we will make sure that we get those addressed in a Q&A session separate from this. So with that said, we will move on to our next position on docket here. So next up, I'd like to welcome our external vice president candidate, Katie Boyd, to the screen for her Q&A. Katie, are you there? Hi, Katie. Welcome. Can you hear us? I think you're muted.
Yep. Apologies, I was having trouble unmuting, but yes, I can hear you all. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great to see you, Katie. We will start with the external vice president questions today. We have a couple of questions from the general audience that I would like to ask as well. But again, you have 90 seconds to answer any single question. Ready to go? Fantastic. So in your application, you mentioned that you'd like to redefine the role of EVP to better fit the needs and wants of our community. What do you believe are those needs and wants for our community, and how will you address them?
I think that's a great question. One of the things that I've been really thinking about in terms of the role of EVP is, especially in a post-pandemic world where we've familiarized ourselves with online platforms of communication and all of these things, and kind of seen our communities develop to have different needs in our own regions. I think that is something that's been missing to some extent on the UNAVSA scale. I think we've had these conversations before about how difficult it is to maintain our constituency community. How do we have year-round programming that allows people to continue to participate? Right now, conference really does bring out a lot of people, but then with the cabinet side of things, even though it is meant to be our year-round programming, I do think that there are ways that we can change things, make it better, and allow ourselves to be a little bit more, I guess, connected to the consensus of the community and what is needed in order to make sure that everybody has the accessibility, the ability, and the information needed in order to participate in all of our different year-round programming and events.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie. Taking a question from the general audience, how would you engage and mobilize the Vietnamese and broader AAPI communities to support UNAVSA's mission?
Apologies, I keep having trouble unmuting. But in terms of working with other AAPI organizations, that is definitely something that I've actually been doing on my own time. I think as a candidate, as a person, a lot of the work that I do revolves around the Asian American community. I, outside of UNAVSA space, am a professor of Asian American studies and ethnic studies. So that is a lot of the work and core of who I am and the things that I care about. Outside of UNAVSA, I'm involved and participate with various other Vietnamese American, Asian American organizations in and across North America within my own communities, and I'm continuing to want to. I want to be able to incorporate those connections into UNAVSA and see how we can better reinforce the bonds we already have, as well as create new bonds. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Another great question from our general audience. What specific steps would you take to ensure that marginalized groups within the community are represented and supported by UNAVSA?
Really important question to be asking. I think one of the biggest things is making space for their voices in the first place, just acknowledging that there are times in which folks do not feel seen, heard, and represented in our space, and how can we make sure that all of our forums allow for the possibility for somebody to reach out to us, to be vocal about what they never know what the community really needs unless we allow them the space to connect with us and talk with us about what their needs are. I think anticipating that and knowing that we can always continually to improve our programming, how we run things, our policies in order to better reflect the needs of our community is something that I hold first and foremost like of absolute importance, because I think our community is made of a lot of people who are already in some ways marginalized within their own like outside communities outside of our own. And in that sense, I think providing the space that we already do has been really important work. And it is just continuing to allow for outside opinions and outside our programming is inclusive as possible.
Thank you, Katie, for answering the question. Next question that we have on docket, a couple last questions for you here. As the external VP of UNAVSA, what is the image and brand you want to show for members outside of the VSA space?
With the external image of UNAVSA in mind, I definitely think that it's not something that we've necessarily been misrepresenting per se, but I do think that it's been very difficult to participate in wider like Asian American communications organizations and sense. I think that having an EVP already in ways
Katie, I think we might have lost you there. Oh, technical difficulties. This always happens on Zoom, so we'll give Katie a minute to come back and then hopefully get her back on deck to finish.
Everybody, I'm not sure where I got cut off.
Katie, yeah, to give you grace for our technical difficulties, feel free to reset that and we can give you the time to finish up your train of thought.
Yeah, I'm okay. I don't know where I got cut off. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Are you okay if we move on to the next question then?
Yeah, no worries. We can move on.
Fantastic. All right. Next question. What do you see are the opportunities in partnering with other AAPI communities?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question real quick?
Yep. Question is, what do you see are the opportunities in partnering with other AAPI communities?
I think it's an awesome question, because I think in partnerships and alliances with other community organizations is where a lot of the work that we can do really shines. Like, for example, you can already see when we do collaborations within our community, we're allowing for all of these different like avenues of like participation and voices within the work that we do, from CPP to having all of the different sponsors we have for a conference. When we do different events with other organizations as part of VSA Academy, etc. I think in those ways, all of those events allow for all of these participations from all different avenues. And I have always enjoyed getting to see and meet new people in that sense. And from there, in an organizational way, I think that these partnerships also allow us to create more space in other avenues. For example, by working with another organization in order to build a programming or event that kind of opens us up to being able to possibly apply for more grants from different government organizations, other organizations, in order to allow more funding to the work that we do. And I think that continuing to allow us to continue building those relationships and allowing for successful and inclusive programming.
Awesome, Katie. Thank you so much. Just confirming with Anthok, are we good on time to ask another question, or are we good, or do we have room, or are we
Yes,
gonna move on?
we have 1 minute 46 seconds.
Fantastic. Last question then for you, Katie. What would you say are going to be the primary challenges you will face as EVP, and what will you do to combat those challenges?
I think one of the things that I've been thinking about as I get into the mindset of taking on the external vice president role are twofold. One of the things is not having, like, I guess, a distinct person who had taken up this position in the past year, in the past e-board term. Without like that connection, I do think that does require me reaching out to past EVPs, asking more questions, seeing what the role looked like in their eyes and how it worked for them at that time. But in that way too, our community has changed since we last had an EVP. And so what the community wants from an EVP role has also also should have changed. And so I want to be able to open up communication and discussion in terms of what does the community expect from me or want from me as their EVP, and how can I best provide that for them. And so those conversations are something that I've really been thinking about and wanting to open up dialogue with our constituents. And the second fold of what I've been considering is acknowledging that for me, I have not necessarily done e-board roles before within my own region. And I do see this as, even though I have this long history with UNAVSA and I've worked on all of these different parts of UNAVSA before, I do feel like stepping into the e-board position is something that is new for me, but I'm really excited to be working with my fellow e-board members and candidates and putting together something awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Perfectly on time. We appreciate you answering our questions today. There are some follow-up questions from the general audience we hope to send your way as well, but thank you again. That wraps up our questions. Next up, I'd like to welcome our internal vice president candidate, David Tran, to the screen for Q&A. David is abroad, so does not have video today, but his audio should be clear. So David, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic, David. So we'll start with our first question here for our internal vice president position. UNAVSA has been a model alongside our regional partners in the past. What are some opportunities for UNAVSA to innovate in order to build our leaders?
Yes. So I think the biggest thing when it comes to internal vice president is really thinking about what our structure is right now and how we can challenge it. There are a lot of things that do work in theory, but the reality that we come to is that our world is changing, as many of my fellow colleagues have said. And so we need to be very adaptive. To be really innovative is to really hone down back to our constituents, our regions, and even our cores, seeing what they need and what they want, and really adapting to the perspectives of their eyesight, because without them, we really can't have this. So some of those ideas that I would really want to implement is really having more quarterly meetings with our regions, just to check in to see how things are going, but to really revamp how we go about things, whether it's our processes, our events, our programming, but also at the same time, have them learn from each other. I feel like there's this big disconnect between our regions where we're doing different things and it almost feels like we're siloed off. With that siloing, I believe that we can further connect each other if we remove the silos, remove the barriers, for us to really have this perspective of being unified.
Thank you, David, for the answer. Our next question that we have on doc is actually from the general audience. As IVP, you'll be working closely with CORE. How do you plan to develop and nurture the leadership development within them?
Yeah, absolutely. So CORE is one of my favorite things I've done, especially coming from the West region. I was one of the founding folks after my successor, Tran, and so we had revitalized CORE from our own region. So a lot of from the CORE myself. I really want to further enhance our CORE relationship by not just making it a, I want it to make it feel like it's a learn from each other and can enhance their own capabilities to become our emerging leaders. Because as we have seen, COREs are representatives of their regions, and as a regional representative, you're taking a lot of information and also disseminating a lot while also developing yourself, and that's a lot. And so being able to create a program where, again, in my platform, we have mentioned creating workshops and also having them do showcases, and then also inviting guest speakers to really enhance their own abilities and further elevate discussion is something that I really want to do. That being said, after 2 years of being in a pandemic and also coming into now, I really do want to take the time and if possible capabilities to have more retreats where we are able to bond not on just a professional level, but to care. And I want to make sure that we elevate that idea that we care a lot, we can also have fun, but also further develop ourselves to the better future.
Thank you, David. Our next question, or next couple of questions, actually also comes from the audience. Great questions, audience. Do you have any internal processes in mind that you would like to update or bring into the organization?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest ones that I believe that we can further indict is having more vision and also advisory folks on the board. With that being said, from Midwest, we have a beautiful thing called stock review, and we also have internal processes when it comes to decision makings that we as the executive boards are looped in. This isn't a way to really say that we are micromanaging, but it's just more so for us to be looped in and for us to have awareness while also giving autonomy, but also giving vision and advisory things that like internal. So one of those is being documented, all of our external communications, our documents, having eBoard have a look at those so that way they're in the know and aware is something that was really helpful for my region. A secondary thing is also to enhance more of our community safety initiatives that I mentioned, creating training assessments where we are fully ramping up our staff and constituents to understanding how to create a better and more positive empowering environment for all. So with that, for Midwest, we have made assessments where people have gotten trained in order for them to further be a part of staff. And so kind of like a business and corporate level, if you don't take the assessments, you can't be a part of our staff because you're not fully trained up to speed. And we want to ensure that we are creating a large knowledge space. That way people are aware of what they should be doing moving forward. And then the last thing I would say is really, more processes is to create more transparent vision in the executive board. From my past experience, there's always been a lot of red tape that has going on. And although that is something that is very important in executive board, it is something that we need to open up.
Thank you, David. A follow-up to that, you mentioned, assessments and a little bit like corporate style. Curious though, what, and again, this is coming from an audience question, but what metrics would you use to assess the performance and impact of these internal initiatives?
Absolutely, I would love to follow up on that. So the biggest metrics when it comes to assessment is almost like summer grading, kind of similar when you take a test. Those are the simple ways that you can do it. But a lot of it is also assessing it when it comes to our training programs. So if we are doing things more community safety, us as executive board, what we can do is create a process where we are following up with our staff and doing a training with them, where we can take a quiz or we can put them in a live scenario and kind of assess. So that way they are getting that practical experience of what to do in these situations. Although hoping that does not happen in their future, we be more prepared rather than not. So those are my metrics that I would do. But also at the same time as well, you are not just going to take the assessment once and be done with it. I would want to make it more of a renewal process where they are constantly taking it quarter to quarter or semester to semester or annually. Just that way they're refreshing their minds and quizzing them and getting quantitative data from Google Sheets or Google Forms, whatever we may use to really evaluate how they are doing and they are well prepared. And once from there, if we move this further, we create and be adapted to what the movements are. So if it's too hard, we find a better way to be more adapted for them to be more learning on it. Or if it's doing really well, that we continue it on, but elevate it for future and scale purposes.
Thank you, David. Our next question is in terms of our regional partners. So our regional partners vary in size, experience, history, and have a lot of different challenges due to the combined three. What would your focus be on with our regional partners?
My biggest focus is to really listen to them, truly listen to them. Although we all come from different shapes, sizes, and different complexities and different entities, it's important that we think about the shared experience that we brought us all here. Our founders started this because we have a shared experience. We want to connect from region to region, so be able to build that network where wherever you go, you can really feel the sense of home and stability and family-like values with others. And so with regions being different, I really want to hone in with being very personal with them. It sounds like a daunting task, but I think we're just not listening to them. There are things to do that are very much offhanded to our regions, and we really need to take the time to think about what they're doing, but also at the same time acknowledge as well our regions are doing fantastic work for us, and for us to not simply acknowledge them or to recognize the fact that they put hard sweat and tears into this is unknowns to me. From my experience as a regional board, it's important for our constituents to feel happy, to feel valued, and to feel respected and empowered, because if we're not doing those things as executive board members, as role models, as executive board, then we aren't serving the community. And that is why we're here, to serve and serve.
Fantastic. Thanks for your response, David. Our next question is, what are some recent worries you're hearing about UNAVSA and our partners? How should we address them?
Yeah, so one of the worries that I've observed and experienced is just seeing that there is such a large disconnect when it comes to our constituents and to UNAVSA. One of the biggest examples I can pull is just when it comes to our programs. There's not a lot of information that comes out. You know, it sounds like from Region's perspective is that we are just tasking them to do things and not really taking the initiative and time to fully explain things, or we're not being considerate about their input, like what they're saying. And that is hard because from being a core myself, we sometimes need to be the bearer of all information, but we are not getting that information from us. And so internally, what I want to do with this role is to create better documentation with our board members and also create cohesive and understandings of information and ensuring that it is being delivered and executed so that way our regions are well informed and know what's going on. And if they're not informed, we do our own onus to make sure that they do. Because if we are assuming that our channels are going to work flawlessly, we're not doing this correctly. We need to ensure all of our back doors, our front doors, our side doors are being covered to ensure that our regions know what's happening and make sure that where there's a connection between UNAVSA and our regions, that it's more flourished than more so of, I don't know what's happening. Yeah, they haven't been. Because regions are in the past, and we need to take it upon ourselves to really bridge those gaps and lessen the gap that we have between our regions.
Thank you, David. That puts all of our questions at time. We had a handful of other questions, again, from the audience and from our own docket, but appreciate you spending the 10 minutes with us to answer. So that concludes David's time here. That wraps up the questions. So next up, I'd like to welcome our second internal vice president candidate, Sophia Zhang, to screen for the Q&A portion. Welcome, Sophia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we'll get started with the first question again. Sophia, UNAVSA has been a model alongside our regional partners in the past. What are some opportunities for UNAVSA to innovate in order to build our leaders?
I believe that change is so common and that we can't stop change from happening. Something about just continuing UNAVSA and continuing UVSA in general is that we cannot assume that what our alumni has experienced is the same as what our future constituents will experience. And to innovate is to appreciate and embrace that change and embrace the new age, the new culture, and just new technology in general. I think as someone who I feel like came into VSA during COVID, there's such a big disconnect between us and people who were in VSA before COVID, and something that I feel like is something that we need to innovate on is just knowing that there's that disconnect and knowing that we need something to do to just bridge that gap between the two groups. And to just bridge that gap between how will we communicate with each other and how we will continue to grow UNAVSA and to grow UVSA in general.
Thank you, Sophia, for answering. The general audience question asked for the IVP position is, as IVP, you will be working closely with CORE. How do you plan to develop and nurture the leadership development within them?
CORE was such a great experience for me. I represented Gulf Coast for 1 year for my term. And in my term, I believe that every CORE has their own personality. Every CORE has their own reason of being a CORE. And something that I feel like would nurture the leadership position of CORE is providing resources and providing that support that, everyone needs. Everyone needs support. And I feel like being core is such a difficult task, especially because you're the person that your region expects to know everything going on with UNAVSA, and just being able to provide resources, provide leadership, provide support just for our cores in general would help embrace the leadership that they want to experience and to kind of help bridge their knowledge on UNAVSA.
Thank you, Sophia. Next general audience question. Do you have any internal processes in mind that you would like to update or bring into the organization?
As I said before, I feel like change is everlasting. It's gonna happen. It's always going to something will always happen. And a lot of what I've noticed about UNAVSA is there is such a big gap between cabinet and just general members and just regional as well. And this is something that happens throughout every region where there's such a big gap between people who are more involved and people who are just general members. And as an IVP potential candidate, I think that something that I would like to see more of is just knowing that we are acknowledging that and knowing that we need to step up and we need to be able to kind of work with our regions, work with our general members, work with everyone, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't be a union without the other people who have built us up and who have continued to build us.
Thank you, Sophia. So along that question, the general audience wants to also know, what metrics would you use to assess the performance and impact of your internal initiatives?
I feel like, as I said, in general, with just working with core and knowing that every core has that pressure of needing to know everything that's going on with UNAVSA is both stressful and it's also kind of like riveting. In a way, just being a core, being IVP, being anyone in UNAVSA, being anyone in any regional BSA, being anyone in general in BSA is just something that we take for granted sometimes. And sometimes it makes you wonder, what can I be doing to make sure that these are getting put out there? And having the ability to just remind our cores, having the ability to encourage our cores and even work with our regions and encourage our regions to talk about what's going on with UNAVSA and what our regions can do with UNAVSA, and open the door between UNAVSA and our regions, because there is a disconnect between both UNAVSA and the regional constituents. And just being able to make sure that everyone knows what UNAVSA is and what UNAVSA represents, but also knowing that UNAVSA is there for everyone else. We're not here just because we want to be here. We're here because we are made up of people who wanted this to happen.
Thanks, Sophia. Last couple questions. Next one is, our regional partners vary in size, experience, history, and have different challenges due to the combination of the three. What would your focus be with our regional partners?
My biggest focus is knowing individually that each region is different. Coming from a smaller and newer region myself, I feel like so much is talked about when it comes to the bigger regions, the more older regions. And what we don't really focus on is what everyone is struggling with. Something that I've noticed a lot about when it comes to VSA in general is that over the span of COVID, and I've heard this from so many alumni, is that there's less member retention and there's less people who are willing to want to do VSA. And that is something that I feel like as cores, as IVP, as in general, it's something that we need to address, something that I feel like I would like to work with the cores on to understand where their mindset going? Where is their region's mindset going? And what they need from us to help them.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. All right, this is the last question, given our time. What are some recent worries you're hearing about within UNAVSA and our partners? How should we address them?
Well, I think David actually paraphrased this really well, but that disconnect between region and UNAVSA is something that is just majorly like out there. And I feel like working with CORE, as I said, you're expected to know what's going on with UNAVSA. You're expected to come back to your region and be able to tell them, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. And yet the people in your region either don't want to join UNAVSA or just don't know enough to actually be interested. And it's something that I've noticed a lot of, because I remember running around as CORE trying to get my region's members to come join UNAVSA events, but it is difficult, and it is something that I feel like should be worked on. But another thing I really wanted to address was the fact that VSA does not have necessarily a great reputation for everyone. A lot of people experience different things in VSA. As I've said in my speech when I start campaigning, is that not everyone's going to have a positive experience going into VSA. And that is something I feel like as UNAVSA in general, with community safety and with everyone we've been working with, that we need to provide more of a welcoming and safe environment for everyone, and something more inclusive, because as times change, people change.
Thank you, Sophia. With that, your time is up and concludes our questions for the IVP position. Thank you, and we appreciate your time. Thanks to both David and Sophia for both IVPs hopping on. That leaves us with one last position as we move forward, is the president position. So with that, I'd like to welcome our presidential candidate, Matthew Nguyen, to the screen for Q&A. Welcome, Matthew.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. So we've got a string of questions and want to make sure we get them from both a general audience question and our questions prepared by the elections committee. So the first question for you, Matthew, is UNAVSA's mission has stayed the same in the past 15 plus years or so. Do you think UNAVSA has fulfilled its mission? If whether yes or no, how would you approach UNAVSA for the next 5 to 10 years?
I feel like the UNAVSA's mission, it's always an ongoing process, because the generations are constantly changing and the audience is always changing. And so the overall mission and the goals that UNAVSA is trying to achieve is largely the same, but how we go about achieving those goals for the next generation is constantly changing. So what the executive board for UNAVSA needs to always do is have a keen understanding and being tapped into the audience that they're serving, the constituency that they're working with. So that requires a lot of hands-on connections with the regions at all levels, at the regional level, at the local level. In all accounts, what I plan on doing is mobilizing a lot of the executive board to connect with the regions outside of just simply like, the cores or like the presidents, but really getting to know the leadership within each of those regions and understanding the unique needs, issues that are ongoing within those specific communities, and how we can best serve that and to better serve the constituency as a whole for UNAVSA, and better engage all of the different regions and the different communities together under one umbrella that is UNAVSA.
Thanks for your insight, Matthew. On to the next question. You mentioned in your application that you wish to provide easily accessible public resources for community members without having to be involved strictly through a conference. How do you envision executing on this mission?
So a lot of that does come back to working a lot more with cabinet and helping flesh out a lot of the ideas that a lot of the projects that cabinet does work on, whether that be through CPP or a lot of IT initiatives or even VS Academy. VS Academy is a great potential source for a lot of resources that can be offered to the community without having to be physically involved through things like conference or a lot of the more hands-on things like CPP engagement activities. It's something that I had a lot of passion for when I was on VS Academy way back in like 2018. And something I always wanted to do during my time on IT was utilize a lot of the website as a one-stop shop for offering these types of resources publicly to all levels of VSA, so that no matter what level you are, you're able to garner some kind of value from UNAVSA as an educational resource, whether that be through like workshops or like presentations or resource guides, this, that, or the other on anything from like running events or how to run an organization, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just one example.
Thank you, Matthew. I think a great follow-up question actually coming from the audience when it comes to that regard is, how would you establish feedback loops with external partners and community members to continuously improve UNAVSA's initiatives?
So part of my platform was discussing more about what is our value added as an organization to these not only our VSA constituency and UNAVSA as a whole, but like what kind of value are we offering to these individuals that are actively getting involved for UNAVSA. So we need to evaluate from the base level, from like just a general member who's like an attending an event. What is it that they're going into this? What are they trying to achieve, and how can we best achieve that? And so a lot of that requires a lot of tearing down preconceived notions of what UNAVSA is supposed to look like and what these programs are supposed to look like, and breaking the mold, innovating on what we can do and what kind of offerings that we can give to these constituents, and how we can create that welcoming environment that shows them that we are trying to offer them not only a place to belong, but also the resources to kind of learn as they're part of our community during their time here. And once we're able to get that going, then this will incentivize them to help to stay involved, because this is a space that they feel like that they are getting hard value out of. And as they get more involved and move up the leadership ladder, they're able to offer that same kind of environment for future incoming partners and members, and it creates a positive loop for more constituents as generations roll on.
Thank you, Matthew, for finishing up your thought there. Our next question for you: how can we take into account cost efficiencies as we scale, knowing that there were several years where we lost money and we historically have had a hard time raising funds?
So I think a lot of that requires mobilizing a lot more of the all staff and the executive board on outreach to potential partners from the get-go. And then also stricter quality controls on I think the bid process. A lot of the finances for there has been a lot of recent focus on the financials when it comes to the bid process for future conferences, since that's the major strain on UNAVSA budget. But I think we need to enact harder controls on what kind of bids we're allowing to go through based on the realistic financials of the organization. Just because a lot of these bids do come from the regions, but some of these regions do have an external knowledge of UNAVSA, whereas executive board and the people and the core and everybody that are directly involved with UNAVSA as an organization have a lot more hands-on experience with what UNAVSA's realistic financials will play out, and using that to provide better quality control on the bid process and what a realistic bid should look like will help us steer in a more healthy direction budgetary wise.
Thank you, Matthew. I think a great follow-up question to this then, when it comes to cost efficiencies, in what ways does the content of the conference continue to elevate UNAVSA's mission? What are the outcomes you would expect between a 300-person conference attendance versus 1,000? Like, what are risks involved with doing something like that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yep. In what ways does the content of the conference continue to elevate UNAVSA's mission? What are the outcomes you would expect between a 300-person attendance versus a 1,000-person attendance? What are some potential risks involved?
So, a lot of what UNAVSA conference does is offer a wide breadth of knowledge from like many different professionals and experts from all these different fields to offer, something substantial to anybody from any walk of life in any area of interest. And so the kind of outcomes that I want to see from 300-person conference through like 1,000 is tapping into a greater number of resources and a greater number of people that are able to offer these kinds of resources to the attendees and the constituents. Of course, that requires a lot more logistical planning, and with that logistical planning requires a little bit more like cost involved, I guess. And because the scope is ever expanding and we need a lot more hands-on with being able to manage that scope. So with that, the risk involved for that cost expansion is well, it's the cost, but like to be able to manage that, we need more top-down education on all of our staff members on all of the processes that conference goes through and in the planning process, and why from a high level we do these different things, and why we need all staff mobilized on each specific aspect of conference planning, especially financially.
Great, right on time. Thank you for answering that. This last question is a general audience question. What legacy do you hope to leave after your term as president, and how will you ensure its sustainability?
So I come from a very logistical background. So the kind of legacy I want for UNAVSA is to be able to build a stronger structure where we have a lot more organized processes, and people are able, at the end of the day, able to look at UNAVSA as a very strong, sturdy pillar for the community, almost like a model or institution to be able to look at for how they format their organizations at the regional level or local level, et cetera, moving forward. So that requires a lot more organized processes from the start of onboarding staff to the very end of their terms. So part of that entails like modularized training that I want to do, a lot of reorganization and restructuring of responsibilities, getting eBoard a lot more mobilized on all aspects of UNAVSA, whether that be cabinet conference or even partnering with the different regions, making sure that we're very hands-on and making people really feel like UNAVSA cares about all issues and all aspects of the multicultural student life. And then also on top of that, I want to make sure that we are seen as an organization that wasn't afraid to kind of develop its own identity from year to year. We do fall into the trap of falling into the same formula that we're doing year after year. So conference after conference kind of feels like just another iteration of the same thing. But I want it to feel like a very unique, identifiable events that happen at that specific time.
Thank you, Matthew. With that, everyone, we are exactly at time. We made it, and wanted to just say again, thank you so much for all of the candidates in the process. With that being said, this recorded session will be shared out shortly to UNAVSA and its constituents, and we will continue the elections process through to this year's conference. So we hope to see you all there. If you have any questions, feedback, or commentary for us, please let us know, and we look forward to seeing you all in July. Thank you so much, everyone.